Hi, welcome to a new edition of Chicanos por la Causa and Chicanos por la Causa Action Fund. My name is Lydia Guzmán. We're here to talk about the issues important to the community. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about Prop 314 and also what's to come with the changes of the new administration and some of the rhetoric regarding immigration enforcement. So joining me today, please help me welcome Ybarra, Ybarra Maldonado. He is an immigration lawyer and a criminal defense lawyer. So welcome, Ray. And also Erika, Mach. Erika, you have a long background with medical practitioners, medical centers, and now you're with Planned Parenthood. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Brought to you by Chicanos por la Causa Action Fund.
So at Chicanos por la Causa, we are planning several Know Your Rights presentations in light of the passage of Prop 314. And with that, we're already starting to see a lot of questions from the community, clients we serve, or other friends and neighbors and even families that have a lot of burning questions about how to protect themselves, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. And these presentations in the community, we're hoping to invite those who have those questions. All of these community forums are all going to be in Spanish, but we're going to be talking about them so that members that are watching this podcast can have some information so that you can talk to your constituents, you can talk to your families, you can talk to your neighbors, your friends at church, or whoever might need this information. So let's start with this proposition first. Okay, on this proposition, it talks about an immigration enforcement where a police officer can stop and question, or if they see, they have reasonable suspicion to believe that somebody crossed the border, that they can act on that. Can you talk to us about that, Ray?
Yeah, I think it's very important to clarify first what the law is and what the law isn't, right? The law does not give local law enforcement the power to go out and just question anybody about their legal status for any reason whatsoever. Even the proposition, which will now be a statute as it's written, clearly only applies to people who have entered the country after the law comes into effect. And when will the law go into effect? Maybe never, maybe that portion, right? It says specifically SB4 in Texas and other laws similar have to be decided before the Arizona law can come into play. So I'm hoping that court decision comes out against Texas and the Arizona part of that also goes away. But there is a lot of fear right now in the community that local law enforcement will turn back to the days of our PIOS of pulling everybody over, asking for immigration status. And we're going to see changes. But I think this proposition specifically, we still have a long ways to fight it in the courts before we see it come into action.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so also there's several things in the law. I mean, I think that a lot of the voters had this misconception that if they vote to pass this law, that it was going to take care of the fentanyl problem because it had that type of language, when in reality, a lot of the experts were saying that this really does nothing to curb any of that. And so, that's very unfortunate. But there's also a piece in that law that says that you cannot use false documents to apply for public benefits. And in that, it has a lot of folks scared in the community. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. As you said, there's already a law in place that prevents undocumented individuals from receiving public benefits. That's already a fact. So people are not receiving benefits now that they wouldn't get later on. So I want to remind folks that they need to continue applying for their children, for their spouses. So individuals who do qualify for those programs should use them. We can't let our healthcare and our well-being be at risk. So we need to, consult with attorneys, really talk to advocates and community partners to ensure that we're well informed and making sure we're making decisions based on facts, like they say in Spanish, que no cunda el pánico. We can't panic right now.
Mhm.
And so we need to go to these sessions that CPLC is hosting and ensure that we have the information so that our families can remain healthy and accessing those benefits.
And so, let me stay with you, Erika, because one of the questions that I received from a Facebook friend, on my Facebook, I have a lot of followers, and most of them are Spanish speaking, but one particular question that really it moved me was about her prenatal care. She asked specifically, "Do I need to stop going to prenatal care because she doesn't have legal status, right?" And so, on something like that, what would you say to someone like that?
I understand it's difficult, but people need to continue receiving the care they need to protect their health care.
Mhm.
And so, as was mentioned, this isn't in place yet. So, even for now, keep going to your appointments, keep seeing your doctor, and get the care you need. And once we learn more, once litigation happens against this piece, that's when we can start analyzing and really making decisions based on what happens at that point. But right now, people should continue accessing their care.
And does that also include programs? Because I know that um, many families, mixed status families, their children are U.S. citizens, and they they're eligible, they're recipients of public programs like Access or SNAP. And is that also the case there with them?
Absolutely. Again, they qualify for those programs and they should keep using them. And I'll call out, you and I worked together in the past Trump administration under the public charge rule changes, where this same question was coming up. And that was our message. Keep using your benefits. Don't unapply, is that a word? Don't disenroll from those services because it only negatively impacts our family. So we need to use the services and apply for our eligible family members so they can get the services they need.
And the key language in this is don't use false documents, right? So Ray, let me turn to you because with the passage of this law that probably may or may never be enacted, there's also some of the national rhetoric that's coming in from the new incoming administration. And there was a time here in Arizona in which, we this is not the first go around with that particular gentleman in the White House. And so there was a lot of fear and a lot of confusion then, and also during SB 1070, and even during some of the immigration actions by former Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio. The community had a lot of questions. They needed to know what they should do and what they shouldn't do. So let's talk a little bit about the rights, and this is going to be the basis of some of the presentations that we're going to be holding in the community. When it comes to, and I'm just going to create different scenarios. When it comes to a situation where someone is stopped by a police officer, because a police officers, what we may find is if they start joining or signing MOUs with the new administration on 287Gs, we're going to see a lot of immigration actions by local police officers. A person gets stopped because maybe a police officer suspects, someone like me or that looks like me or whatever might be undocumented. What should that person do and what shouldn't they do?
Yeah, so definitely, if you ever find yourself in that situation, there are some tips and steps that people, if they know about, can help protect them. And we've gotten this information from over a decade of fighting these kinds of laws, right? Before the Trump administration won, there was Arpaio, and in between there was Obama, who was also some people call the deporter in chief. And let me tell you, for the past 15 years I've been an attorney, it's been nonstop. The reality of being a person of color living in the borderlands, that there's a possibility that you're going to get pulled over, and that might lead to an encounter with ICE. Under Obama, we had people in car accidents. That's it. They were a passenger in a car accident. Next thing you know, they're in Florence and Immigration Detention Center. So I don't think this new administration is really going to change any of that. It's going to be the same thing as it's always been. We've always been under attack. We've always had that target on our back. And what people can do, and what we've seen to be successful in the past, most important thing that they can do is not give any evidence against themselves. People have the right to remain silent. They have the right to tell the officer, the ICE officer, the police officer, I am not going to give you any information. I don't want to talk to you without my attorney being present.
Mm-hmm.
People get scared of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really tell people, like, look, it's a nervous situation. When you're just driving, listening to your music, the lights turn on, you freak out.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you've learned kind of just goes away and you're in a complete state of shock.
Mm-hmm.
You have to practice with your friends and your family, role play that you're in this situation, get asked the questions and give the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Only will then, I think, you feel comfortable when that situation actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been in situations where because people refused to give admissions, to give confessions, we're able to win the jury trial, get the person over to immigration, win cancellation of removal, and now they're a legal permanent resident. Talking specifically about someone that was arrested in an Arpaio raid. Now, if that happened back then, it can happen during Trump. If you know your rights, if you're educated, informed, and you're ready to perform on that and deliver on that, you can be okay in the future.
Because one thing that hasn't changed is the Constitution.
Exactly.
So, but they do have to give their name.
Right. If you're driving in this situation, right, you're driving, law enforcement officer, there is a state statute. You have to give them your name. You have to give them enough information. Essentially, think of it, if they want to send you a ticket someday in the future, you have to give them that much information. What I'm talking specifically about is if they ask, how did you come into the country? What country were you born in? Right? Anything that's evidence towards what these criminal statutes are, anytime an officer is doing an investigation that could lead to criminal charges, that's where your rights come into play and you have the right to remain silent and you don't have to be a witness against yourself.
Now, when it comes to the issue of, giving, you have to make sure that you give your right name. Okay, make sure you don't give them false information. But there are times when police officers will try to cross that boundary and start doing their interrogation, whether they're thinking that they're going to be the next Arpaio or the next whatever. But some of the very pressing questions that they ask is, do you have a driver's license? And if not, why not?
Yeah. So anytime you're asked a question that could lead to further criminal prosecution, your correct answer should be, I don't want to answer your question. I want to talk to my attorney. Every single time. There is nothing to gain from trying to talk to law enforcement when they have in their mind they're investigating to get probable cause for an arrest. Don't say anything. Let them take you in. Then call your attorney and let the attorney handle it in court. In the street, you trying to present something and make arguments that you're going to prove that you have kids and you deserve to be here, and when your kids are sick and your mom's sick. We're not talking about dealing with the Catholic Church here, folks. We're dealing with law enforcement. We're dealing with ICE. All they're trying to do is get evidence against you, to bring charges against you, and then get you deported. And your job to protect yourself, protect your family, is to say, I don't want to answer any questions without my attorney.
Right. Years back, I heard a lawyer from the ACLU say, well, they're the ones that are conducting the investigation. Why are you helping them do their job?
100%.
So
all they're trying to do, they're not trying to be your best friend. They don't want to go out for drinks later. They're trying to get evidence from you to put you in prison.
So there's several ways that there's an encounter, right? And we're talking about a traffic stop right now. But there are times when the police have to come to your home, whether you're a victim of crime, whether you're a witness to a crime. And what do you think this will do to that? And how can someone better prepare themselves to make a report? Because I think in the long run, we still want them to report, right?
Yeah, so there's two different instances that we have to completely separate. Law enforcement pulls you over, law enforcement's looking out for a criminal investigation, and they're looking for information. And then there's the times when the person is considered a victim. So they're proactively reaching out, or law enforcement's still there, but they were the victim. That scenario is completely different, right? There is something called the U visa, where if someone's a victim of a enumerated crime, you might be able to get legal status. There are protections for people who are victims of crimes. So in those instances, it does make sense to cooperate with law enforcement. say, yes, this happened to me. Yes, I was the victim. Yes, I'm willing to prosecute, because that could lead to not just that person stopping from that kind of activity in the future, but you maybe being able to get benefits as well. Now, the big fear is, okay, with this new law coming into play, with Trump coming into play, more 287G, are people still going to be safe to do that? And there's been conversations about maybe having an attorney with you when you make that call or have that interaction, taking a community member with you, or going to a specific officer that's already committed to not asking any immigration questions. Because what you said earlier about there being certain officers who are just like, I'm going to be the next Joe Arpaio, I'm going to make a name for myself. You could come into one of those officers that's, instead of treating you as a victim, they're trying to turn it around and get information against you.
Right. And to the advocates that are watching this, I know that when I encountered individuals that that want to make a report and they don't feel safe doing it from home, they can certainly go to a center, whether it's they need to make it from a doctor's office or whether they need to make it from someone that's trusted. They can certainly call the police at another location so that they can have somebody with them to help advocate for them. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is, and I've talked to different law enforcement agencies about this, is sometimes they say, well, I need some ID, right? And so when that happens, I usually stop them and say, why do you need their ID? They're reporting a crime or whatever. And one officer told me, well, they get lazy, or sometimes they're having a hard time understanding the spelling of someone's street name, for example, like Heather Bray or whatever, and they would rather see it on an ID or something so that they can just write all the information down on their police, as on their card or their police report, which is kind of like a lazy way of doing it. But, I need that information first before I before I want to make sure that we advocate for them so that this is not, you're not asking for their ID because you're checking on their status or anything. It's just because you're probably trying to be lazy and not get the spelling right. We'll get another piece of mail or something. Okay. So I think it's important that the advocates also can feel comfortable in reaching out to even medical centers. I mean, there have been instances where even medical centers are assisting when a patient comes in and, to file police reports. Am I right?
Yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of resources out there that our advocates can tap into. So they can absolutely reach out. And even if the medical center might not have that capability, they can definitely provide a resource to those folks so that they can get the help they need.
Great. And so, sometimes teachers are a great advocate, someone who can step in. And so this is why it's important for them to learn from podcasts like this or attend some of the workshops. Let's talk about another scenario. Now, the administration, the new incoming administration, some of the discussion that's being made is about they're going to target people that might have deportation orders. So that means that their ERO efforts are going to ramp up and people are going to get knocks on the doors. And this information is not to cause panic in the community, folks. This is just so that we can learn what our rights are. But someone comes knocking on your door.
Yeah, and that's great that you preface it with that, Lydia, because I think there's so much fear and panic in the community right now that we need to be telling people like, hey, we've been through this before, we're going to get through it again. But what were some of those tips and things that we were able to implement that we're able to get through those times? Well, that's what we're giving away here. And for example, someone knocks on your door and let's say it's ICE, right? They knock on the door. You have constitutional rights and they're no more powerful than when you're in your own home. So at that point, when you're in your house, you're in your little kingdom there, you do not even have to open the door to them. You don't even have to respond to them. You don't have to say a word. So the best advice I give to people is if you think it's law enforcement at the door and you didn't call them because you're a victim for something, don't answer the door, right? And if they want to speak to you bad enough, they'll usually leave a business card, they'll leave some paperwork, and then you can call an attorney's office. The attorney can then call, hey, I'm representing so-and-so, you were at their door, what are you looking for? What's going on here? And use that as an opportunity to get information about what's going on, as opposed to opening the door and saying, how can I help you? How can I help you arrest me today? Is basically what you're saying if you open that door. For someone to come into your house, you don't open the door. Even if they see you inside, for them to come into the house, law enforcement, they need to have a written order signed by a judge to allow them to breach your property.
Mm-hmm.
If you open the door, they could take that as an invitation to come in. They could take that as an invitation to come in and see whatever they see they can arrest you for. So not opening the door, not giving people permission. If you accidentally open it and it's law enforcement there, don't make any moves. Don't say anything that implies they have the right to come inside.
Mm-hmm.
And you can quite politely say, I'm sorry, I don't talk to law enforcement. You can leave your card and my attorney can give you a call and you can shut the door. Like, it can be as simple as that conversation. So it is something that, again, don't want to cause fear and panic in the community. But I think it's super important that people know you have no legal obligation to speak with law enforcement. You only do so if you want to. And if they have a warrant to come into your house, they can come into your house, search for things, maybe arrest you, but they still can't even force you to talk.
Many times, our families are so cute because sometimes we have kids and the kids open the door and there are some law enforcement officers who either don't understand the Constitution limitations that they have, or they refuse to acknowledge or abuse them on purpose. So that happens. A child will open the door, and a law enforcement agent, whether it's federal or local, will consider that permission to come in, and that's not so. Right.
So what we say the law is written in textbook. We can read it. How the law gets implemented in practice, as we know as people of color, is often very different. So law enforcement officers will abuse your rights all day, every day. What happens then is we're able to file motions to suppress or motions to dismiss when there is government misconduct. So I'm not saying, hey, it's going to go down like this in the streets, but I am saying if you exercise your rights and they violate your rights, well, then there might be an additional way that we can win your case because of the government misconduct.
Great.
And I'm sorry, one more thing to mention, Lydia. ICE, 99% of the time, does not show up with a written order from a judge.
Oh.
Maybe U.S. Marshals, maybe FBI, if they're doing a criminal investigation. But if it's ICE looking for someone with a deportation order, they'll pretend that they have an order, and it's the deportation order, which is signed by the administrative judge, which gives them zero rights to come into your house. So don't be fooled. If they say they have something, pass it through the door. You want to see a signature from a judge giving them authority to come into the house.
Okay, so it's important to look for a signature from a judge.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. And I think this is why also those screen doors are so important.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Great.
Or now pictures, text it to me, whatever. Just don't open it and don't let them in.
Perfect. I heard of actually somebody saying, look, I don't want to open the door, but I'm going to look through the window, show it to me through the window.
Yes. No, during the Arpaio times, multiple times, I was on the phone with somebody while they were in absolute fear because the police were at their door. Hey, put me on speakerphone. Let me talk to them, right? There's just, those times are coming back. But again, we have that experience from the past 15 years that we can build on and do it even better this time.
So, as far as one of the things that I've also heard the new incoming administration talk about, the implementation of Project 2025, hire American, buy American, and there's going to be some worksite enforcement. And I know that in the past, we heard about some of the raids at like meat packing plants or whatever. But then at some point they became administrative, where they were doing I-9 audits in which ICE would come in with agents and look at the personnel records and then create a list of the people that weren't authorized to work, right? And then of course they were told to let them go. Now, I don't know how this new administration is going to be doing some of this, but if they're going to be following their rule of whatever it is that they wrote on Project 2025 and doing some worksite stuff, we saw some worksite raids under Arpaio. Okay. And so tell us, what would be the situation if there's an action at a worksite?
Right. So I fully believe worksite raids are coming back, and they're coming back on a bigger scale than we saw before. We saw the Trump administration do worksite raids. I went out to Mississippi when they did the largest ICE raid in the history of the country, as Trump called it, and worked on those cases out there with folks. And really was that point. And I was like, well, hey, I worked these Arpaio raid cases. I've done jury trials on this. This is happening. Let's go out there and use what we know to fight for the community there. And the same thing here, we're going to see them again throughout. It's going to happen. And when the law enforcement shows up there, it's the exact same advice that I've been giving the entire time we've had these interactions with law enforcement. It's do not say anything. If there are fraudulent documents, fake documents in the I-9 file, those are documents that are there. They still have to prove that the person voluntarily handed over those documents. They still have to prove that you are the person that's working under that name, right? There's still a case that they have to build. So don't help them build that case. They come in with a large police presence. They cordon off the neighborhood. Nobody can leave. You're put in a room by yourself. You're then handcuffed, taken to a police station or detention center and interviewed. And you're going to lose your case if you say, yes, I'm so sorry. I was just here working. I'm trying to support my family. You still have a chance to win your case if you say nothing and ask for the right to speak to an attorney. How? Because the government must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed acts and you knowingly committed acts that are crimes. Simply seeing false documents isn't even enough for them to get a conviction. So they're going to come hard in trying to drill people to get those confessions. And that's when the community needs to fight back and say, nope, want to talk to my attorney. And people feel horrible doing this. I think we as a community feel like we want to cooperate. We want to be good people. We want to be open. We're not afraid of living and supporting our families. But at the same time, we have to reframe what it means to remain silent. It's not a cowardly act. It is a constitutional right. The people that wrote the Constitution had the fear of big government, had the fear of government overstepping and going into people's houses. So they put these rights there for us, the people, to be able to live by them to protect us from the government. And that's what we're going to see the next 4 years. Big government trying to come after our community. We need to learn our rights and exercise our rights.
You know, one thing that really hurts, I mean, obviously, an individual will do what they can to support their family, and I think it's a basic human right to be able to do that. Unfortunately, our country has made it very difficult for people that want to do that, illegally. The one thing that concerns me is that there are places of work that they make employees wear a name badge or they have their name sewn onto their shirt. What is the danger in that?
Yeah, I mean, the trial that we did on this kind of case is exactly that, where the name that they were going by at the company is the name in the documents, but it's not their name in their actual documentation. So I think any time that you are identifying yourself by a certain name, that's evidence that goes back to that file. Now, I mean, there's always excuses. If I was in front of a jury, I could say, hey, maybe they forgot their name tag that day and they just had to grab whatever was there. Or maybe they didn't have their shirt clean, so they borrowed somebody else's shirt. But yes, any information that you have on yourself, when law enforcement shows up, they're going to use that as evidence to tie you back to that file. And remember, it all goes back to that file, right? So if we're talking about I-9 audits and going after that, then we also need to talk to employers. Like, talk to your attorney. What is your legal right as far as I-9 forms? How long do you have to keep them? Do you have to keep the documents that go along with them, or do you have to just look at them, right? So I'm not an attorney for any employers out there, but I would strongly advise to reach out to your counsel and say, what is the minimum I have to do to comply with federal law? And what do I have to keep, and what can I get rid of?
That's a good point, because also there might be some sort of implications and also liabilities for employers as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we saw that a lot. I mean, how many lawsuits did we see come out for the abuse of employers? And then in Mississippi, another thing that we saw was not just the workers, but some of the upper management getting charges as well. So I think it's opening up that exposure to not just the workers, but also the owners.
Right. There was a case of that car wash company that their employers are the ones that, that received a lot of the punishments. So let me switch gears here to the false documents, because I know going back to the false documents, and sometimes, like I said, there are some folks that are doing what they can, and sometimes they'll be working on that. Now, we're hoping that that doesn't carry over, and there is already a protection that the state has to apply for benefits. So the false documents really isn't something that in that area. How does that work?
Yeah, again, as a parent, if you're undocumented, you can apply for benefits for your children, right? If
Mhm.
they were born here and they qualify, you're simply the applicant. You're not receiving the benefits. So again, as people make choices of how they move forward, they need to keep that in mind that they can still access those benefits for their family members.
Mhm. Great. So I guess just to sum it up, the applicants can be, they should use their right name.
Correct.
Okay, the applicants, but they're not the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries are the U.S. born children.
Exactly. Or your spouse maybe, but yes.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so this is important to keep in mind, right? So on something like that. Now, another area that has also been an area of concern is when you're simply walking down the street, you're at a grocery store, you're at, and or you're a passenger in a car, okay? Because many times I jump in the car without my purse or without my ID or whatever,
Mhm.
And we're driving. Even along there are some freeways in the southern part of the state that do have checkpoints.
Mhm.
What are my rights in case, something like that happens? I mean, there's a checkpoint.
Yeah,
You know.
checkpoints versus pullovers are two different scenarios. So if you're pulled over by law enforcement and you're a passenger in the car, or you're walking down the street and an officer comes up to you and starts talking to you, what they will always say in court is that it was a consensual encounter, that me and this person were just having a consensual conversation.
Mhm.
They were free at any point in time to leave. They chose not to. So the key question that I tell people to ask in those scenarios is very simple. Am I free to leave? Right? So you ask that to the officer, officer, am I free to leave?
Okay.
If you're walking down the street, they come up to you, and the officer should revert back to their training. Oh, do I have reasonable suspicion to keep questioning them? Is there probable cause to arrest? Because they're asking me if they're free to leave. And if they say no, they need some sort of facts to support that legal conclusion that they can justify detaining a or a citizen or a non-citizen for any point in time.
Mhm.
And if they don't have those legal conclusions, then they're in violation of the law for holding that person there. So, am I free to leave is the key question to ask law enforcement when you want to walk away. So, don't just walk away, don't just run away, because then they're
Right.
going to chase you and probably tase you or
Oh,
worse.
okay.
So, we want to ask that question: am I free to leave? Now, we're talking about checkpoints along the border area. That's usually not local law enforcement. That's usually immigration, the federal agency, who's doing a document check to make sure that you do have citizenship status.
Mhm.
So there you do have less rights, almost like a quasi-border area where they do have the right to ask you questions to ascertain your citizenship. Again, you still don't have to answer, and you can still refuse to answer, but then they would probably take you into custody, run your fingerprints, come back that you're a citizen, resident, whatever you have, then they would let you go.
All right. So it's important for those, especially those that are traveling, let's say like between Yuma and here or whatever, that they probably will be going through a checkpoint.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
the days of no checkpoints, I think, are over. I'm born in Douglas, and I lived down there at multiple different times throughout my life. And I remember coming through the checkpoints when they were regular, and I'd have my grandfather with me going to, taking a doctor's appointment in Tucson or something, and just being drilled on whether or not I'm a citizen, and going to secondary and saying, okay, well, I'm not going to open my trunk for you. No, I don't want to. It's my constitutional right not to open my trunk for you.
Oh.
So they pull you over and say, okay, we're going to bring a dog out here. So we're going to see those things again. Trump's going to bring those back for sure. It's going to frustrate and irritate people in the borderlands. But the same thing, we have to educate our community and exercise our rights when we're in those situations.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about how to avoid being stopped. Okay, because obviously there's a couple of things that police look for to establish probable cause. Okay, can you maybe name a few of those things that it's kind of it's lousy policing, but they're doing it because they want to stop you and question you.
Yeah, so I mean, in the city area, the metropolitan area is a little bit different than the directly on the border. But here, what we often see is law enforcement pulling somebody over and saying, obviously speeding, right?
Okay, yeah, don't speed. Yeah.
Don't speed. Going too slow. I've been pulled over for that before. You were going too
Okay.
slow. The opposite of speeding. cracked windshields,
Oh.
things hanging from your rearview mirror, things that are just normal, but officers are just looking for a pretext to pull you over and then look for additional indicia of criminal activity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's those kinds of activities that if you are driving in a vehicle, you want to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the vehicle where they're going to pull you over because you're a hazard
Mhm.
on the roadway, as far
Mhm.
as your muffler, uh, rear windshield, whatever it is that law enforcement can use for those petty things.
Even
They're gonna
tinted
do it.
window?
Tinted windows, tinted too deep, whatever it is, they're going to look for
Mhm.
reasons just to begin that conversation.
Mhm.
And in the border area, we fought these cases like crazy, and the Ninth Circuit and U.S. Supreme Court just continue to side with law enforcement. I mean,
Mhm.
they'll
Mhm.
say like the car was riding too low, the car appeared to be too dirty if it just came from the desert, the car was registered to Phoenix when you're around Nogales. So there's just a million reasons that they use in the border area to
Mhm.
justify
Mhm.
that pullover. But long story short, you have a better chance of winning on a motion and suppress at the end of the day if you're following the laws, if you're not speeding, if your car is in compliance.
Mhm. Mhm. So I think the key is to not give a reason. I mean, have your car in working order, have your tags paid up to date,
Mhm.
right? Make sure that there's no damage to the windshield, that the car is clean, um, tint, no speeding, obviously, and no going too slow. My mom. So, um, but so those are some of the things that how to avoid doing that. What about music? Because I know that I heard that maybe sometimes playing, you're blaring some Vicente Fernandez. Would
Yeah.
that be a reason that have you seen?
Anything is, right? But as someone that I took one of my attorneys to court this morning, he got in my truck afterwards and the bass just started hitting as soon as I turned the car on. This is who I am, right?
Mm-mm.
I love loud music. I love Mexican music or rap music. So I don't want to tell the community, stop being yourself, stop
Yeah.
expressing yourself. Like if they're going to pull you over, it's going to happen. Know your rights when that does happen.
Mhm.
Exercise your rights. Don't fight it in the street, right? Don't try to be out legalese the officer when you're out there. Just,
Mhm.
Remain silent. Say you want to speak to an attorney and let us handle it in court.
Mhm. All right. So let's talk about protection. Okay. Now, and again, this conversation is not intended to create panic in the community, but I think it's important that we talk to the community so that they can start looking at ways to start making preparations just in case something happens. It's almost like having insurance, like car
Mhm.
insurance or auto insurance. But in something like this, I know that in the past we talked about, making sure that the family has a conversation with the family, including the children. For example, if the parents were both detained, it's important for them to have some sort of written document, notarized maybe, who's going to take care of the kids if both of the parents are in detention or if they get deported, right? There's there's so many situations where maybe there is no other family member, or maybe they need to put the kids in charge of a neighbor, a pastor from church or something like that. And so, what are some of the areas that you think families should prepare for?
Yeah, and then we were talking before we started recording about triggers and being triggered, and like I feel like just hearing that stuff again is triggering me back to those times when you had something bad happen and you're seeing a child in front of
Mhm.
you, and there was no plan in place and nobody knew what to do,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So what we're saying again is going to that very point of let's be prepared, let's hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Mhm.
And I think having your documentation in order and having these conversations with family in a non-threatening, non-traumatic way is
Mhm.
very important.
Mhm.
Certain documents that we can tell people to get together, the G28, if you have immigration concerns. G28 is a document that's completely free. You can download it from the website, print it out, and just have whoever's a non-citizen sign it and give it to a friend, family member, loved one as part of this packet you're going to put together. And what that does is it gives authority for an attorney to talk with immigration on your behalf if you're ever arrested by immigration.
Mhm. Mhm.
So sometimes we'll call and they'll say, okay, yeah, the family of so and so wants to see what's going on. And they'll say, okay, where's your G28? And if we don't have that document in the past, they would refuse to give us answers.
Mhm.
The late's been a little bit better. They've been letting people sign it when they're in there. But again, we're going back to Trump. So we could change back to where having that signature already on hand would be beneficial. And then within that packet as well, I'd recommend having power of attorney, right? Someone that you trust to have
Mhm.
power over your finances in case you need to use that for bond money or to pay bills while you're temporarily incarcerated. But again, emphasize on the word trust, because I've also seen this abused, where people give this power to somebody, nothing ever happens to them, but that person abuses and takes their finances. And then with the children, you have power of attorneys that are valid for 6 months, giving someone legal custody of them to enroll them in school, take them to hospital, whatever it is. Things that we don't like to talk about, but things that, quite frankly, if something does happen to you and both parents are arrested, you would want this documentation to be in somebody's hands with the plan of action.
And I think that's also the case when there are some parents that are taking their children to a continual medical appointments, but without a power of attorney, I believe that they need something like that also, so that they can visit with their doctor and talk to the child's doctor, right? I mean, or they need some sort of consent.
Absolutely. And, again, taking recommendations from the attorneys and making sure we have everything in order, because if heaven forbid something were to happen, then we know at least our families are safe and our children can continue getting the care they need.
And lots of medical centers also have staff where they have social workers on staff, right?
Absolutely.
And the social workers are also very good advocates. And I've seen social workers in the past where they're the ones that are making the phone calls and talking to people where the patient is a child, a minor, and they don't have those consents, and it's hard to give them the continual treatment without the adult. And I think they have been heroes in making sure that they work with the consulate's office so that the consulate can actually go into the jails and or the detention centers and have something signed so that a minor can continue to receive their medical treatment.
Right. And we've said it before, we've been through this here in Arizona in the past. So now is the time to be ready and to ask those questions and make sure we have everything in order. So if something were to happen again, we know our families can access those resources. We know they'll be in good hands. And there are promotoras in the communities, so many partners that are working on this issue together to make sure that we can give our community the information they need so they can best prepare for what may come ahead.
Great. And I'm hoping that we have more promotoras and social workers that are also paying attention to this video, because this is going to be important information that we can all share. Now, going back to the powers of attorneys, we talk about, what's going to happen to the kids, but, and you mentioned this beautifully, when there's also an importance to not only vet a lawyer beforehand, a trusted lawyer, but I think it's important for families to also have a plan in place of who's going to roll out these plans. There's going to be someone, because you can't leave this to the kids. Obviously, the kids need to know, have this conversation with the kids, but maybe the kids, there's a neighbor or a trusted friend or someone that's going to roll out this emergency plan, right? But one of the things that I've noticed also is that many of our families, you only have one person's name on the car title, okay? And that car may need to be liquidated so that they can get maybe bond money or whatever. But if that one person is in detention, then we have a problem because they cannot sell it.
Right.
Okay, so the recommendation on this would be to either...
Exactly what you said, I think, in terms of having someone you trust. And we have to go back to our foundations of community organizing, which all of us have done for many, many years. And people in the community are well aware that the best protection is local protection, right? We're not going to sit around and wait for the federal government to come save us this time because the federal government's against us this time. So what can we do in terms of local basis, local organizing committees, where we can identify people of faith, community organizations, and then find within that a person or a couple people that you trust that can implement this plan if something is to happen. I think having the name on the title, having multiple people on a title that you trust is a good idea. It saves the step of needing a power of attorney, but having that power of attorney at the end of the day should give you authority to still sell property, go into bank accounts, take money out, whatever needs to happen. But really it is just something in general that, not to strike fear in the community, but things happen. You get in a car accident and you can't communicate. Like, these are kind of things that we never want to happen to us, but to be prepared for those out of ordinary situations, and people know what to do with your kids
Mhm.
and know what school they go to. I mean, that's just important information to have.
Now, would I need a power of attorney if my husband is detained and to go to his boss and pick up his last check?
Yeah, anything that the employer wants to say, hey, I don't know for sure if you are still married to him, if you're still in good standings. We've had that a lot where employers just say, I'm only giving it to this person. Most employers, though, will still say, okay, you're the spouse, here you go. Wish him the best, let's get him out. But I think having that power of attorney, even if you're the spouse, would be recommended because you never know when it's going to come up.
Okay. Now, during our presentations that we're doing in the community, we are going to have someone who has been in the different rounds with us during Arpaio and during SB 1070 that is a notary. And they're going to be talking to us and sharing with us and educating us on what type of documents they need in order to notarize, because obviously not everybody has a state ID, right? And so I think that's important. And I don't know if any of you have the answers off the top of your head, because what is it that we need? And I think that's going to be something if you're interested in that, please come to our community forums, because these community forums, we're going to have a list of them. And Chicanos por la Causa is not the only organization that's going to be doing this. Just know that there are going to be many community organizations that are going to be working with lawyers. They're going to be working with notaries. They're going to be working with different partners so that we can make sure that we have that information for the community, including, and we're all on the same page, giving out the same information. We're at this point coordinating and coalescing so that we're sharing the same information. So unfortunately, during this discussion today, I wasn't able to invite someone that's a notary, but I believe that there are some documents like a passport that I think might be valid for them to notarize.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but I would think it's any valid government ID would be my guess, right? So even if it's not a U.S. document, I think having a passport from your country of origin should suffice to be able to sign for
Right.
something.
Or la consular también, right?
Consular, yeah.
Yeah. And also, there's going to be a representative at our next community forum from the Mexican government, from the Mexican consulate's office, who they're going to be there to pass out information. I think this information is so important because they were a partner with us during the public benefits. They were a partner with us during some of the last round of community forums. And when people come in and ask for information, they have a wonderful Departamento de Protección.
Amazing.
That also are there to help give out information and also do jail visits, as well as they do visits at the immigration detention centers. Am I right?
Yes, I mean they also run a great program called PALE, which they have a free attorney there. It could be different area, it could be civil, it could be immigration, criminal, every day from 10 to 12 for Mexican nationals. So if you're ever, somebody, they're panicking, they're freaking out, what do I do? Well, they can go to the Mexican consulate and get that consulate with that attorney. We go there once a month, but there's multiple firms across the valley that go there. So it is that important, what you said earlier about finding a trusted attorney. The Mexican consulate essentially vets those folks before they let them on board. And if anything goes wrong, then they can go to the consulate as well. So.
And I'll add, the consulate also has their ventanilla de salud, right? And so if folks feel more comfortable going to the consulate, they can also help answer some of those healthcare questions or kind of gear them towards other providers, other partners who may be able to answer questions.
Very good, very good. So folks, again, this is not to put panic in the community, but I'm hoping that the viewers of this podcast are stakeholders in the community that will assist us in giving this information to the community so that they know their rights, so that they are prepared with the information that they need to protect themselves and to create an emergency plan. Hopefully they never need it, but it's just important that they have it just in case. So with that, I think we're going to close this, and I extend an invitation to look at, attending some of the many Know Your Rights workshops that are going to take place throughout the state. Please make sure you visit, pick up information, take it back to your clients, to your constituents, or to friends and family, because this is going to be important information, and this is where we're all going to need to rely on each other and step up for each other. So thank you, Ray. Thank you, Erika, for joining me, for this. And I look forward to working with both of you during these next couple of years.
Likewise. And thank you to CPLC for having us. Thank you, Lydia, for inviting me over. And I think it really just is that, like, we as organizers, lawyers, professionals, like, let's just make sure that we're building up the community and reminding them we've been here before. We're resilient people. We're going to get through this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us. And again, we're in this together, right? We're here for each other, and anything we can do to educate the community and really be there for each other, we're in this fight together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.